What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of History in a Drink.
Tonight, our episode is about food explorers. We were lucky enough to come into our fruit grown here locally now called Lychee, and it's in season right now. So we decided that we were going to make this the key ingredient of this week's drink. We'd like to thank Eric Tingstrom for providing those.
He's our local food dealer, our fruit dealer.
Okay.
So yeah.
So today's drink we're going to make is kind of a play on a mojito with using gin and basil instead of rum and mint. So our first two ingredients that we're going to put into our shaker is a slice of lime. We've got some basil leaves, and then I'm going to add a little bit of sugar. Cane sugar is best. Then I'm going to muddle that all up.
So that's sounding like a mojito so far.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And then we're going to add the gin. All right. And so the gin that I'm using today is from a distillery out of Rochester, New York called Black Button. I've gotten a few different liquors from them, and they're really amazing. They started making a moonshine, and that's why I got that. And then they also have now bourbons. They do a bunch of different gins. They make a lavender one. This one's called Citrus Forward because I'm not a big gin fan. So anything that makes it taste better than all those juniper berries and stuff like that,
because that's the main piece of gin is juniper.
Yeah. And then we made our own lychee juice. This is 400 of them.
So now, if anybody doesn't know what a lychee is, do we have a lychee here? I do have one back behind here. It is the most unusual fruit that I've come across. So they kind of look like a strawberry, but they look like a strawberry that you left on the counter and is completely dried up. They're almost coarse like sandpaper on the outside. But what is so unusual is you actually peel them. And when you peel them, they almost look like you had peeled a grape. So they've got this really moist, just juicy flesh on the inside, and they've got a seed on the inside. So you actually peel it a second time. You peel the flesh off the inside to get that seed out. I'm going to
seed's huge.
And the seed is huge. So you can see how that seed is on the inside of there, but then you get that really nice flesh part on there. And it's literally like a grape, which is crazy because this outside is such a dry, rough carapace basically for it.
Yeah. So, and then just adding it to a bunch of crushed ice.
Excellent. We can see here he's got nice. What do you have? You have a actual lychee fruit and
a basil leaf as the accent to it.
Excellent.
So, cheers.
Excellent. Cheers. Absolutely delicious. Very, very good.
All right. So today what we want to do is talk about food explorers. And about a year ago, I read a book called Food Explorers by Daniel Stone. And it's about a man named David Fairchild. And he is an interesting character. The book takes place in the last part of the 1800s into the early part of the 1900s. And he grew up in Kansas and went to agricultural school out there. And he saw a lot of the problems the farmers were having with just not having a lot of options on what kind of crops to grow. So what he ends up doing is
at this point in time, what were we as a country? We were growing wheat?
Yeah, and that's the big one. Out in the plains is growing wheat. You have corn in the Midwest. You had tobacco to some extent in like Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee.
And obviously potatoes in Idaho.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then just random crops in the rest of the area that are more like subsistence crops. So what we wanted is our diet was really quite limited back then of what we had access to. So
and it also too, it wasn't like today to where it was easy to, especially produce, to be able to ship stuff. You're talking about literally a slow boat from China coming on over. There was no real airplane production. There's no really anything that could get stuff where it needs to be.
And that's exactly how he's going to get all this different species of plants from around the world here is by slow boat through the U.S. mail system. Can you imagine that today? Sending plants and stuff through the U.S. mail system from places like China and Southeast Asia and India. They don't allow that because they're afraid of it bringing in diseases and stuff like that to our country today. So here he is, he's traveling around the world, and he had the minimal budget on this, and he actually found a gentleman who became kind of his patron, and his name was, what is his name? Thomas Lapro.
But was he doing this through like a university, or was he doing it?
No,
through...
he was doing it through the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
And he was a one-man department or a one-man area in there, and he was just traveling around. And what he would do is he would just send all of these different fruits and vegetables to himself back in Washington, D.C., and hope that whoever took them in the agriculture department would kind of nurse them and take care of them.
Now is he sending whole plants? Is he sending seeds? He's
sending all of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, the way he became really famous is, what is the one plant that was given to the United States, probably the most famous gift of a plant given to the United States?
I don't know. When I think of government, when I think of like Washington, D.C., and like what do they always talk about? The cherry blossoms in the winter or in the springtime. Right, exactly. It's probably the cherry tree. Well, I mean, and even Washington with chopping down the cherry tree. And
exactly.
All that, so.
Well, it is the cherry tree. And so the ones that are there, he helps bring them from Japan to the United States, lays it out, helps with the planting of them. But what was really fascinating in the book is he goes with the head agriculturist or horticulturist in Japan to pick out the exact trees that would make the journey on that slow boat from Japan this time all the way to Washington, D.C., because they took it, I think they went to San Francisco, then they loaded them on trains and took them from San Francisco to Washington that way, because that cut it by a tremendous amount. But it was just fascinating to read and see how many different species. They estimate that he sent back over 200,000 different species of plants of all kinds, vegetables, fruits, varietals, like flowers, all of that kind of stuff.
I'm sure probably seasonings too, you know, the different basils and everything like we're using our drinks tonight.
Exactly. And so he sends all of these things back because what he was trying to do is find other plants that our farmers could grow in cooperation with the ones we were already growing to try and maximize the output of the land and replenish the land as well. Yeah. So I'm sure that you've learned about that idea of crop rotation, where you plant one crop, you have 4 fields, and you rotate them around so that they use different nutrients in the soil. Well, he was looking at that same idea as well. And so he wanted to find all of these different crops that could do it. And he specifically only went, for the most part, in the northern hemisphere. And it talks about how difficult it was to bring plants from near the equator and in a lot of Africa and South America, because our climates are different. And where we have this huge area all around, where you have Asia, Europe, and North America, that is all land masses that they can grow similar plants on because it's similar climates. It's different.
You really have Africa, South America, and Australia. That's it.
Right, exactly. And so he did send those back, but a lot of them wouldn't grow and couldn't be used here. Now, in 1916, he and his wife, her name was Miriam Bell, and she was Alexander Graham Bell's daughter.
Oh my goodness, okay.
So he had some money from there as well, once he married her, that helped with his journeys, because he would go away for 2 and 3 years at a time on these expeditions to find stuff, and go up on little boats up into the little islands in the Philippines or in Indonesia, up the Mekong River, through tons of rivers in China to find all of this stuff. So he and his wife bought a piece of property here in Florida, actually in Coconut Grove down by Miami. And then his sister-in-law, I think, bought a piece of property right next to it. And so they initially bought 8 acres, and the siblings bought 3 more acres. And today that is part of the, what is it called here? The National Tropical Botanical Gardens.
Which is not that far away from us. If you ever want to take a trip down there, it's only about 3 or 4 hours.
Now
so.
you have to, it's by appointment only.
Okay.
So you have to make an appointment to go there, and there is a fee to go there. But this is his actual land, and with all of the stuff that he sent home.
So it was 11 acres total he had?
Yeah. All the stuff that he sent home that he couldn't grow up in the temperate areas.
Yeah.
This is the one little area in the lower 48 where you can actually grow tropical fruit.
Oh.
And so supposedly what I read is he has about 30,000 different species of plants there.
Wow.
Right. Now, I don't know if all of them are, there may be just seeds that have been collected and in storage and stuff like that, but 30,000 different plants there. So, and it's called the compound. It's Kompong. And he named it after his estate that he had in Java, where he kind of was his base and he went out of. He actually wrote a whole bunch of books about this as well. So his most famous book is The World Was My Garden, and it talks about his journeys. And then you have Daniel Stone's, who gives it more of the whole life of this project of exploring for different foods and how they were used in different agencies and different governmental things to try and figure out how we can do different things. Because I remember going down to the Edison House
in Fort
Myers, and during World War I, Thomas Edison and Henry Ford were working together to find a rubber alternative.
Yeah.
And so they were planting fields of goldenrod here in the United States because it would grow here, and they were trying to process that and turn it into
versus the rubber trees that were down more in South America and Central America.
Yeah, for us, the biggest place was the Philippines.
Yeah.
Where we got most of the rubber. So that was really fascinating to me to see what plants. But what really I found fascinating was of most of the fruits and vegetables that we eat are not indigenous to the United States at all. You know,
so not at all. So of everything that we do, so what was indigenous? What do we have?
Well, we always think of the Aztecs and their use of maize or modern day corn.
Right.
All right. Then you had the Incas in South America, and their big crop was potatoes. Okay. And that's why you are starting to see in the grocery stores the little red ones and the purple ones, and there's golden ones and white ones. So there's like 400 different varieties of potatoes that you can grow. So we had those here. And then really the big cash crop of the 4 cash crops that were grown here in the United States pre-Civil War, you had tobacco, rice, indigo, and cotton.
Now, was cotton?
Cotton is from Asia as well.
So that's brought in. That's not.
So the only one that was here naturally was tobacco.
Okay.
And they had to find a way to make some money in the colonies, so they used tobacco as that and send it back home.
So how amazing that America is this, not only is melting pot of people, but now we're a melting pot of our vegetables and all the food and everything that we eat. It was all brought from somewhere else.
Yeah. And think about it. If you've traveled to a country in Europe and you get just their local foods, the palette of stuff that they eat is not very diverse.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff came from Southeast Asia, like India, modern day Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and China, and Indonesia, and brought all of those things back here. And they're now a common part of everyday life. And think of us trying to live without sugar.
Yeah, well, sugar, and I even think about us being, Florida, our state fruit is the orange.
Yeah.
And that's not native. That's
No.
an invasive species.
Exactly. It was brought from China to the Mediterranean where it was grown. Mm-hmm. And then the Spanish brought it over here to grow here, and they grew it in Florida.
Yeah. And
then also in California.
So bring it back around. Talk about lychees. Where are lychees from? What's their story? What's their thing? Was that one of the ones that he brought over?
He did.
Okay.
So he brought over lychees. He brought over mangoes. The other ones that were really fascinating that he brought over, for all of you who eat kale, he brought you kale. All right. Pistachios. Just tons of other things. Quinoa, avocados. all of those vegetables and fruits were brought here. So the lychee is actually from southern China. And the first recorded knowledge of this goes back to around 1100 AD,
Okay.
or CE, however you want to call it. And it's mentioned because one of the emperors was traveling around, tasted it, and fell in love with this fruit. And he then, at great expense, had it delivered from southern China to the capital up in Peking every day. So they would have fresh fruit every day.
So that was his special treat for himself.
Exactly, him and his wife.
Excellent.
So you have that as kind of the first time we see it recorded. But that's the amazing part, is how many different little fruits and vegetables there are that we don't even think about that we're eating. And we try these new ones and it's like, oh, this is really awesome, because this is the first time I've had a lychee that it wasn't like a juice or in something made somewhere else.
And this came about because literally Eric got a hold of us and was like, hey, it's lychee season. I guess there's a very small window that lychees ripen on trees here. And he's like, hey, it's lychee season. Let's do something with that. And so we're like, wow, we've never really had that. And suddenly we started doing some research on it and found out it just fits so well into this that we talked about. So more about lychees now. So lychee is still in China, is still a common,
Southeast Asia,
Southeast
and India.
Asia, okay.
And I was reading that they actually contain a cyanide-based chemical in it, and if you eat too much of it, it causes you to have hypoglycemia. So in India and in Vietnam, I was reading, during lychee season, they have a lot of kids who end up in the hospital because the poor kids are going
just eating them off the trees as fast as they can.
Exactly.
Well, it's very sweet. I mean, like I said, it's almost got like a great texture, consistency to it with the seed.
Yeah. And because they're so small, you got to eat so many of them.
Yeah.
And so they end up in the hospital because they're not eating anything else, and it just builds up in their system.
Yeah.
And their blood sugar just like plummets because of it.
But if you add alcohol to it, it makes it a whole lot better. So you don't have to worry too much about that cyanide.
Exactly. So if you're interested, again, the guy's name was David Fairchild. Go and look him up. He's a fascinating character. And that's the thing that I love about history, is you can look at just one person. Nobody knew his name, really, but look at the huge impact that he has had on the United States and what you eat. More than any other person.
When you walk around at Publix, 90% of the stuff that you see in that produce department was, not from here, and was actually introduced to us by him.
Yeah, and you can see with the economy the way it is today, Publix and the other grocery stores label where their fruit is coming from. And so you can see, because different fruits are going to be harvested at different times of the year in different parts of the world, so we can have these fruits available to us year round. So I think that's what we've got for you tonight. Yep. Next week, we're looking at doing Mai Tais.
Excellent.
And then we'll do one more episode in our first season. We're going to do 10 episodes this season. And our last one, we're going to do the American drink of choice.
True American original moonshine. Excellent. All right. And assuming we'd have to be talking about Prohibition, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Cheers to everybody. Thanks.